2024 was not my best year for reading books. I think that was partly because I read a lot of short stories. I've read over 150 short stories this past year, but I still managed to read enough that I managed to compile my top 5 books for 2024. And I'm going to share them here because I found that top 5s or 10s for the year or in for a person's career on YouTube is a really good way to find book recommendations, and I hope somebody will find a book or two that they want to read. So without further ado, here are, not in any order, my top 5 books for 2024. The first book is Murtagh by Christopher Paloni. This I read at the beginning of last year, so almost 365 days, and I read the Aragon series when I was pretty young, and I remember that I thought that the first 3 was like Star Wars, but it was pretty good. I mean, it's elves and dwarfs, and I like that stuff. And then you have, I read his short story collection, and that was good. And I read the first book of his sci-fi one, and that wasn't my favorite, but I did like Murtagh. I thought the beginning was really, really good, and the ending was really good. And the little bit when Murtagh got captured, got a little bit of a slog for me, but I still really liked the book. I liked going back to the world, and I'm excited that he announced that he's going to come out a sequel, and it kind of was obviously it needed a sequel, but I'm looking forward to it. The next book on this list is Frank Herbert's Dune. I actually did a book review on Dune. That was the first video I put up on this channel. It's a short. I think I still have it listed, and it was kind of cool because that was my first video. It was very short and basic, but I posted the short a little while before Dune Part 2, and it kind of surfed the train. It didn't get a ton, but it got a little bit. It got like 100 or something, and it was a very encouraging start. And so this book is kind of important. Isn't just a top 5, but it's also a very important milestone on this channel. But I liked Dune. It's an older book, so it read a little slower, but I just read a chapter a day until I got to the ending. I don't have very much things to say about it. It's a classic in sci-fi, and so if you like sci-fi or you like fantasy even, and it was very fantasy, it was reminiscent of Star Wars. People said George Lucas stole from it. It's not 100% true, but I get where they're coming from, and it's a pretty good read. Just takes a little while. The third book in my list is The Promise of Blood by Brian McClellen. It's the first of the Powdered Mage trilogy, and when I say Promise of Blood, I actually mean the entire series because I like the first one the best, but it's a package. Now, The Promise of Blood is, think Mistborn, except instead of just coming into the Renaissance, it's the French Revolution. It has like the same it has the same gritty vibe of Mistborn, at least what I remember of Mistborn, and it has a nice hard magic system. I liked its pairing. It had like the powder mage and the privileged elemental magic, and I really liked the gifts too. The 3 magic systems, they weren't cohesively tied together, but I liked how it was like 3 smaller magic systems, and they all were very intuitive. I really like those. But yeah, Promise of Blood was a very good read. I enjoyed the trilogy. I know he wrote another thing in the set in the world. I haven't had time to read it. I found with school and stuff, I have a lot harder time getting through library books before I need to return them. That's why I don't have a lot of the books here to talk to you about, because a lot of them I got from the library. But yeah, I like Promise of Blood, and if you like Mistborn, you'll like it. I liked Mistborn, and this one was pretty good. The next book on the list is something I can actually show you. Put it up here. Redid the top bookshelf, new year, slightly new design. It's the Pawn of Prophecy by David Eddings. This is the first book of the Belgrade. I read all of these books. The Pawn of Prophecy I first heard about on a Daniel Green video, and actually Promise of Blood from the same video, and I liked this one. And while there was no Rangers in this, and Daniel Green said there was, I liked basic premise is farm boy finds out his kings. You've heard it before. It's a pretty common hero's journey thing, but David Eddings does it well. It's also kind of refreshing. This Daniel Green said this was like the baby step towards modern fantasy, like the half turn before like Robert Jordan really modernized it. Like there's no elves and dwarves. There are an underground race, and like there's the equivalent of orcs. They're not orcs, but they're like the bad guys, and that's it. I think for magical races, there's magicians. So it's not all the huge epic Tolkien-esque stuff, but I I still liked it. It was actually pretty refreshing to have a hero's journey story in such a small package. I no knocker. This is a little bit of a knocker. Wheel of Time, and even recently, Brandon Sanderson's Stormlight Archive. They're so stinking big, and like, if you like Wheel of Time, this honestly scratched the same Wheel of Time itch for me, except it's way shorter and easier to read. I mean, they're not chunk is huge, and it didn't take me half a year to get through them. But yeah, Pawn of Prophecy. I'd recommend if you're looking for one. It's pretty old. They still print it though, and you might be able to pick some used. I didn't find it used, but it seems like the class of fantasy that you could find at a thrift store if you got lucky. Now, is this final book I'd say is one of my very favorites, and it is from the author of Wheel of Time, and that's The Warrior of Atali by Robert Jordan. This was actually the first book his editor and eventual wife Harriet read from him, and I really liked it because and Harriet picked up on this. It is very, very similar to the classic Robert E. Howard Conan the Barbarian stories. It had very tight but imaginative prose, where you don't need pages and pages to get a vibrant scene. And it's something I've been trying to work on my own writing, is paint a vivid picture but use minimum amount of words. I picked this book up at my friend's house, and I opened it and I read the first bit, and I realized it was like the Conan the Barbarians. It was the reason that Harriet knew that Robert Jordan could write Conan the Barbarian stories when Tor wanted them printed. I think it was after one of the movies. It's in the foreword. Harriet writes a foreword, and I I really enjoyed it. I picked it up, I read the foreword, and it's like, oh, that's delightful. And then I opened the first page, and it's like, wow, this is exactly like Conan the Barbarian. And it was at a friend's house, and so thankfully, I'm very grateful, he let me borrow it, and I read it. The basic premise is it follows the barbarian who is just like, think stereotype, strong, barbarian leader, and they were like desert people. They were wandering and their adventures. I don't want to spoil the ending, but there's some interesting stuff, like a multiverse in it, which I thought was very interesting. It's only touched on. It was interesting, and it's a pity there's no other books in the series, but because I want to know how the multiverse thing worked. But I enjoyed it a lot, and it's certainly more of one of those older ones. If you like the old Conan the Barbarians, this is going to be straight up your aisle. Or if you want to see the beginning of Robert Jordan, I'd recommend checking this out. It's also just a really good. And those are my top 5 books for 2024. I hope you liked this video, and I hope you at least found one book that you liked. I'll put all the names in the descriptions, and probably in post I'll also put covers up somewhere. But thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.